And I just want to encourage men, that engage, be there, be present, and you can do it. You can.
Well, hello and welcome to the Stand Up Dude podcast. What does 40 years of faithfully honoring God's calling in your life look like? Well, today on the Stand Up Dude podcast, we have a guest with us who has done just that and has stories, so many stories to tell. We are really proud to have him on the show today. And Tim, would you like to do the honors here?
Shocking, he's a friend of mine.
I know, a friend of Tim's. What?
Yeah.
Curt Williams. Hey, man. Thanks for being here, you guys. You are going to be blessed today, man. This is a beautiful friend of mine for 35 years, and I know nobody that really knows more about men, young men, fatherhood, the whole deal. So God bless you, and thank you for being here, my brother.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, we just happened to have you here in Nashville with us, all the way from Houston. He's right here.
So crazy.
What a blessing.
Glad to be here, guys. How can I jump in on this?
I want to know your story. I want to know, like, 40 years is a long time. I'm going to be 42 next month.
Oh, man,
so
you just made me feel really old.
You've done something that is almost my entire life, and that to me is amazing. I can barely remember to brush my teeth consistently for a whole week. So to do something like that and honor God and what He has called you to do, let's kind of give us your backstory there, and then I want to just move into how did you end up in that ministry, and what is that ministry?
Yeah.
Well, the boys that I work with now, I don't have any of the excuses they have. Many of them abused, neglected, molested, horror stories. But I don't have that. I mean, I was raised in a tremendous Christian home, good, godly parents.
Yeah.
But God gave us that thing called a free will. I'm not so sure why He did that.
Yeah.
Because I've got a brother and sister that have not yet sinned. I mean, they're just wonderful, godly, kind of boring people, but they're just faithful.
Yeah.
And man, I was the one that decided I wanted to drive fast cars and chase the fast girls and all that. And so I ran away at 15. I began to humiliate my family. And at 19, I did something that I had to run from. It was so serious. And I came to Texas, had no idea, never been to Houston. I went from my hometown to Houston, Texas. And in a few days, I was arrested again. And it was like, God was like, I'm not going to allow this. But over, the next few weeks, I got involved in the oil field. And in the oil field at that time, we were working insane hours. I mean, 14, 16 hours a day. If you could work 6 days a week, 7 days a week. And the money was insane too. And one day, a man in the middle of the night came up to me and said, man, you need some Go Fast. And I was in a refinery. And he dumped this little white powder into my Coca-Cola. And man, I worked the rest of that shift, went home and cleaned my place. And, I was
never been more productive.
Yeah, never been. I was really succinct in everything I was doing. And the next night he gave me some more, but it was the third time before I asked him what it was, and it was meth.
Oh.
And that began my 3-year addiction. And, it took me down some dark paths around very dark people. And it led me into the industry that was moving it into an area of Houston that Tim's very familiar with, in the Montrose area of Houston, Texas. Yeah. And we exploited the street kids to move product. And man, this was something I'd always drawn lines and said, I'll never go this far, but then I went went there. And I'd draw another line, I'd never do this, and then I did it. And you can do all these things very successfully if you don't have a praying mama. Can I get an amen from you? I mean, I've
or get wrecked when you do get a praying mama.
Yeah,
eventually.
I've got this picture in my mind, guys, that there's this red phone on God's desk that when mamas pray, He snatches that phone
100%.
up. I'm on it. I mean, He'll break your legs if she asks him to.
I'm on it.
Man, I had a praying mama that was not going to allow me to sin successfully. And crazy long story, but making it short, I finally got to the point where I couldn't live with me anymore. I already hated everybody, including the girl I lived with and the people I hung with and what I was doing. I was just miserable. And I weighed 125 pounds. Man, my teeth were loose.
You
I
were
was
close,
a mess. Buddy. And man, it just came a day when I said, I can't do this anymore. And May 7th, 1984, I surrendered. Now, I think that, speaking to men here, it's not a religious move. It's coming to the end of your rope and saying, I surrender.
Yeah.
And the thing that gets me about it is that God gets ripped off every time this happens because he's willing to trade his life and beauty and everything for mine. He got the bad end of the deal.
Bad end.
And yet he takes that deal over and over and over again. And people watching this podcast may think, well, man, he did that for you too. If you've come to Christ, he's taken that deal.
Yeah.
He's taken whatever you brought him in your mess, and he's exchanged it for his life. I mean, it's just such a crazy. It's insane. So, I just knew something was up. I knew God was calling me to something, and I felt like I was going to boot camp. I ordered off for this Navigator's 3-year Bible study course and finished it in 8 months. I mean, I had nothing else to do. I'd lost all my friends,
Yeah. About to lose your teeth.
Yeah, and I was a mess, and God was just pouring into me. And I'd grown up.
Cool.
I'd graduated from a Christian academy. I had gone to church every day of my life, it seemed like. And this is where, Tim, you and I have compared our testimonies.
Yeah.
There's some close places there.
Yes, there is.
But, R.W. Shambach, one of my favorite old dead preachers, guys, he once said that it takes a real genius to make the gospel boring. The problem is we have a lot of geniuses.
Wow. That's so great.
And I went to a church that it was dead as 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
And they portrayed the beauty of Jesus in a boring way.
Yeah, wow.
Where if we took our Bible and we really made a movie about it, it'd be beyond R-rated.
Yeah.
This book about intrigue and betrayal and war and sexuality and all that, and they could make it boring? Well, they did.
Yeah.
And they lost me.
Yeah.
Because what I was doing on Saturday nights was a lot better than what was happening on Sunday mornings.
Yeah.
And I've made a vow to my kids that I will never introduce you to a place that makes the gospel boring. The boys that we work with, the gospel is always going to be alive. And
Yeah. Tell them how do you work with boys? What do you do?
Well, just a few months after I came to Christ, man, I was back out there on Westheimer, Montrose, and Houston, and November 9th, 1984, coming up on 40 years. I've got a boy walking towards me. He's dressed in all black. He turns and looks at me, eyeballs me. He said, "What you got there?" And I had some cards with my phone number on it. And he looked at it and dropped it on the pavement and just ground it into the dirt. And he said, "I don't need that." He said, "I need help." He goes, "I'm 17 years old. I'm HIV positive. I'm a heroin addict, and I'm getting sick. I need help." And he goes, "If you'll help me, I'll do whatever you say. But if you're going to hand me that piece of paper and walk away, you can go to hell."
Yeah.
Wow.
And it was an epiphany moment in my life. And I don't know if the Holy Spirit uses that kind of language, but it sure came through.
Yeah.
And that night I took him home.
Sure worked.
And he was the first. Later saw him come to Christ. And but so many of the kids we were working with were tricks, were prostitutes off the streets.
No kidding.
And so that was the birth of Youth Reach. And since then God's just added to it, brought tremendous people in, resources, and we're in 2 different states with campuses, and God's just doing a great work.
Yeah, so it's Youth Reach Houston, and then there's
Youth Reach Gulf Coast.
Youth Reach Gulf Coast. I always
Alabama.
stumble over that because I know it's in Alabama.
Yeah.
So it's around 70, 80 acres per place. One of them focuses on the 14 to 18,
12 to 17.
12 to 17, young men, obviously, young boys. And then the Alabama is ages
18 to 22.
18 to 22. Yeah. And so what kind of young man will end up at this place?
We occasionally get a boy with a good dad, but that's probably 1 out of 100.
Okay.
The vast majority, it's fatherlessness. They know him. He abandoned them. He's addicted himself. He's distant, or he was the perpetrator. We have high security in Houston because there are fathers that make threats against the boys we have.
Wow.
Against their own sons. And so it's we've got boys that have come from all over the country. And for the last few years, guys, we've got a lot of failed adoptions. So we've got a boy from Guatemala, the Congo. We've had him from Ukraine, Russia, all over the world.
They literally just fell in the middle gap of no man's land, and they had to.
Well, some Christian families go over and adopt these kids.
Oh, okay.
And they're adopting, a kid that's 8 or 9 that doesn't speak the language.
Okay.
They bring them over. They do not assimilate. And they drop them off to us and usually never come back.
Incredible.
Wow.
So you've been doing this for 40 years. And one of the beautiful things that I know about you is you, boy, oh boy, you express yourself really well, and always wanted to ask you this. And I think now is the moment, and we'll go from here to other things. But brother, if you had a group of young men that were in front of you and you had a moment, you had 5 minutes to tell them about what they're actually looking for, possibly. What do they actually need? What are the characteristics that you could recommend as a man who has been, you've put almost 4,000 young men through your beautiful, and I'm not going to call it a system, I just don't know what better word to use. What would you, from all of the assessment, there has to be some things that boil to the top of what you would tell these young men. Would you share that with us?
Yeah, I think that we need, the whole thing of the name of this podcast says so much, get up, man, stand up,
man.
Yes. But I think that men need to know they can. They need to know they can, that they can do it. I'm amazed watching some of my heroes, men that they're not eloquent, they don't have all the tools, maybe they don't have a high education and all that, but they have a depth of character. Most of them, it's because Christ is in them, that there's a humility. And even when I look for staff, there's this beautiful mix that's hard to even describe.
Yeah, but when you see it.
And confidence with humility.
Yes, sir.
Most people think confidence means cocky, haughty, but confidence with humility. And I'm going to tell you, I asked my wife a while back, I said, what do you think of that? And she looked at me and she smiled and she said, that's what women want. They want a man who's confident with humility. And that is, employers want it. Younger men will follow it. When I bring in staff and I notice that kind of anointing of this bizarre, confident guy, knows who he is, but he doesn't walk with arrogance.
I know.
He's teachable and he's humble.
Man.
That is a combination, a chemistry that when you say, I'm going to adopt these principles, because you look at Jesus, nobody's ever been more confident. Dude, he was God. He's walking on earth.
Right.
I made that.
Wow.
That's hilarious. He's just kind of walking around with that kind of confidence. He's got it going on.
Yeah.
Yet he's washing the feet. He's talking. He's caring for the children. And he wasn't just going, okay, enough with you guys and just blowing us all away.
Yeah.
And so if a man says, I'm gonna work on my character, I'm gonna work on who I am. And, I'm gonna tell you this real quickly. One of the things we teach boys at Youth Reach is the 3 Ds. It's a very simple little thing that when somebody is busted, when you've done something wrong, when you've been caught, there's the 3 Ds is what men do. We deny, I didn't do it. We diminish, it wasn't that bad. Or we divert. Well, they did it too.
Or how about disappear because they hide?
There you go.
That's what guys do too.
Exactly. Let me go up to my man cave, and let me just walk away.
Yeah.
And I'm convinced that the mothering instinct is a real thing. Mothers have an instinct that only 6% of children that are abandoned by the mother.
Okay.
94% are abandoned by the father.
Wow.
The fathering instinct, I don't believe it really exists. Men choose it. Women are born with it. It's just in them. But men can somehow compartmentalize and walk away.
Yeah. Crazy. They choose it.
They choose it.
What does that look like?
Well, I think that, when a man has a child and that little boy, that little girl is in his hands, there's something in his heart that's born out that says, I'm in. no matter what.
No matter what. Yeah.
My wife and I, we feel like that the base of that is our marriage. And we've got a really sweet, beautiful motto to our marriage. Y'all want to hear it?
Yes, please.
There's no way out. So the agreement is that if she decides to leave me, she has to give me enough time to pack and go with her, and I'll let her drive, and I'll sit in the passenger seat and talk bad about me the whole way.
Yeah, it's fine.
But we're
I don't care.
But there's no way out.
I'm still in the car.
I'm in the car. I'm going with you. And we've been through some dark times, but our kids have seen that, man, through thick and thin, hell or high water, mom and dad, they're going to be there for us. And we desperately need examples of covenant marriage in America because people aren't seeing it. People are not engaging in it.
Yeah.
And so that's such a basis of a man being who he is as a husband and as a father, is saying, I made a covenant. I made a vow. I'm going to keep it.
I'm going to keep it.
No matter what.
Now, Curt, I think you may have mentioned it earlier, but you have several children yourself.
Yes.
How many?
We only have 7.
Only 7. Okay.
Just getting started.
Yeah. That's impressive.
And they're amazing,
really impressive.
by the way.
That is really cool.
Yeah, I mean, and this is something that when I say it, it always gets people uncomfortable. But I think that in America today, most Christians that are truly born again, not just the cultural Christian, but the remnant, the people that are born again, they have given their lives on the altar to God. And then I think that one of the next struggles is, do we give our finances? Are we going to tithe, and are we going to give offerings? And there's a point of surrender there. But so few surrender their reproductive choices to God. I hear people say, well, we're going to have as many as we can afford. Well, my wife and I had as many as God could afford. And every time we had a child, we'd say, God, what do you want us to do? It's up to you. And 7 times he said, go ahead. And after that, it was very clear. He said, you're done. And my wife was disappointed, guys. She only wanted 10 more. I was like,
10 more?
At some point, the plane's got to land,
Oh, my goodness.
I've got 7, and man, we don't have any issues with our kids at all. And that sounds crazy to even say, but there's no addictions. They honor God. They chase the Lord. I'm here in Nashville with my son Josiah, who's just had my first grandson. And to watch your son, Tim, it's coming for you.
I know, I can't wait.
But when you see your son, I've told people, you don't know how good of a parent you were until you see your kid's parent. That's the revealer of how you did.
When you explained about, I called you last night, said, hey man, what's going on? You're like, I'm watching my son carry his 2-day-old son in his loving, gracious arms, being so tender and present to his wife and to his baby. I'm wrecked.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
But we live in a society where some men can just clock out.
Yeah.
And I just want to encourage men, that engage, be there, be present, and you can do it. You can.
It is hard, but it is not impossible. And with the Lord's strength, it's entirely achievable. I know I have 3, and I know the temptation is I want to do something else that's easy. And it really comes down to that choosing to do the hard thing. It's just like any other good thing in your life, whether it's being physically fit, whether it's accomplishing something as a career goal or sports or anything. It's if you don't see your children as something that you have a responsibility to grow and shape and mature, and instead they're just like, oh yeah, they're their own thing. I won't. They'll figure it out. You're leaving money on the table, so to speak. You're allowing just whatever comes along to take them, instead of seeing like, I have this opportunity to shape possibly their impact on millions of people over centuries of the gospel going forth. And what is that statistic? Do you know the one? It's like when the grandfather, well, first of all, when the father comes to Christ in a home, it is more likely that everyone in the family comes to Christ and that they come to church, and that the impact that often has is that those kids grow up and have kids who come to Christ.
Yes.
But when that father doesn't come to Christ, it completely sets it back for generations.
Absolutely.
And the Lord is faithful. He can do incredible things to transform lives and redeem the most, obviously with the stories you've even just shared a little bit of, he can do incredible things to redeem broken situations. But I know, like with Stand Up Dude, our goal, our aim is to impact men, young and old, not to feel like we only are targeting young men or only older men. It's like God is ready for you right where you are. Like age for him truly is just a number. It doesn't, he's like, today is the day of salvation.
Absolutely.
Right now is the time that you can give it over. You can be redeemed. So, I know I've rambled on here just a little bit, but you inspired me. So
thank you. I do really believe that, I've got a buddy that always says, if you can still fog a mirror, you still got something to offer.
Still got something left.
You still got something. And, my father when he was 88 years old, his legs had given out, and he just looked at me and he goes, son, I can't do what I used to do, but I can make phone calls. He goes, and the church just gave me a list of people that need to be encouraged.
Cool.
And I just thought, man, here you are. You got every excuse just to stare at a TV till your clock runs out. And he's like looking at one more thing he can do. And at one point he told me, because, part of the reason is I want to go home to be with the Lord. And if there's something left, I want to get it done. So he was just trying to finish. But I don't want men to live with regrets. Now, I think regrets are crippling. And God is such a God of redemption. I mean, guys, if you really want to get down to it and use a strange vernacular to describe our God, he's a show-off.
Yeah.
I mean, through the Bible, he could have used the smart ones, but he consistently used the jacked up, messed up,
David,
black sheep, murderers, adulterers, cowards like Gideon. I mean, just on and on and on. So anybody that wants to say, well, I don't know, you don't know about me, shut up.
Yeah.
If you fog a mirror, you qualify, jump in, do your part.
I love how when David, first of all, David is my favorite Bible character, but first of all, he was a great sinner. He was a great sinner, but he was also a great repenter.
Absolutely.
And he said that man right there is as a man after my own heart. Like, what? That's God. That's God talking right there. And what I love about David is he did it continually in his life. But the first story that we find is where he was called forward to meet Goliath. And what David did that was very unique is David showed up. And then what reminded me of that is when you said show it off, because when we show up, it allows God a beautiful opportunity in our life to show off.
That's good.
And that's what David did. Sure, he had practiced some, keeping the wolves away from the sheep with his sling. And, it's not like he automatically just became the most brilliant, stone caster. But at the end of the day, he let that thing go, and it went exactly, it was directed by the Lord, because he showed up and the Lord showed off. But, man, I think that the 3 Ds, I think you maybe should change it to the 4 Ds,
I'm
bro.
about to throw that 4
Disappear.
in there.
Yeah. So don't disappear when challenges are presented to you. Don't disappear when there's an opportunity to stand and be present, to not shrink back, to not be constricted by your limiting beliefs and limiting thoughts that God's not going to do this. I can't do that, so I might as well just sit here and shut my mouth. But instead, to be present and loving. Here's what happens is when you're in God's presence, that's where the change happens. So you do that beforehand. Start your morning out with being in God's presence. Start your morning out with being in God's word. It fills you up and the light enters your eyes, and you will find that you are able to be present in those moments and allow God to show off. You don't have to force that. You don't have to you barely even, you may not even need to pray about it or pray for it. It just happens when you're filled with the Spirit like that. Curt, you have seen so many lives change. I can't imagine, really, honestly, the amount of challenges that you have been brought continually to your literal doorstep. And I know that Curt loves telling about the success stories that has come through there, and I love that. Tell me though, what is one of your favorite stories of somebody who has come that they were probably the lowest that you've ever seen, and tell me what the Lord's done with this young man who probably came to you when he was young.
Yeah, that would probably one of the greatest stories would be a young man named Brett Medlin from Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
Yeah.
Angry, come from a home that was just a living hell. I'd met him at a youth camp, sitting on the back row with hair down in his face, and didn't want to talk to me. Weeks, months go by, and he calls. He says, man, I need help. And he came in, a lot of anger, went through a lot of work with him. And he was with us almost 2 years.
Daily. It's a live-in.
Yeah, he lives
Youth Reach is a live-in situation.
Yeah, so he's living with us in our homes there and working with him. And toward the end, he told me that God had told him, man, when I leave here, I'm to go to the LA base of Youth of the Mission. And I thought, well, then you got some direction. Well, a month or two goes by, he leaves the program and he doesn't go there. He's disobedient after hearing the voice of God. Now, we got a Lord out there that'll spank you, and he did. I mean, Brett, and within no time was fighting addictions again, very angry, hurt. And we met at a hamburger joint, and he just looked at me and said, man, I got to go back and do what I was told to do.
Yeah.
And he went to the base in LA. And after that, his mission trip took him to Cambodia. He spent 8 weeks there, came back, sold everything he had, went over there with a little duffel bag, went to language school, learned a very difficult non-phonetic language. Then he learns to drill water wells, and he has drilled, he's coming up on 1,000. Probably by the end of this year, he will drill his 1,000th water well.
Gosh.
In a country where children die by the thousands from dirty water.
Yeah, 60% die before they're 3 years old.
3 years old. And Christianity is not yet 1%. And we go to bed every night and we sleep peacefully. But should we, when there are countries that less than 1% know Jesus?
Yeah.
What's
not even on the list of those three.
They're not even on the list of religions that are established there.
Yeah.
And so what he's doing is it's illegal for 3 Christians to gather together.
Okay.
And the oppression of the government's unreal. But last year, he became one of the very few Americans to ever be gifted Cambodian citizenship.
Oh.
He was sponsored in by the son of the prime minister.
Cool.
Wow.
And so now he comes and goes through the airports like a citizen.
Golly.
And it's not, and he's spreading the gospel every school they go into.
Wow.
That they drill a water well. They're sharing the gospel to hundreds of kids. And the government looks the other way because of the water wells.
But
if you go over there as a missionary, they chase you off.
Oh, yeah.
And I've been over there 6 times to visit with him.
Yeah, I knew you'd
and
been
to
there.
see the poverty and the pain, but then to watch that water well push that water out, and the children playing in the water, clean water for the first time in their lives.
So what do you think made the difference? First, let me tell you what happens. Just paraphrase of what he does. These young men come in there, and he teaches them discipline. He teaches them. Now, I don't want to just cast over that. Literally, he teaches them discipline, and he teaches them responsibility, and that there is results for their actions. You probably have a couple more things, but those are the things that I know. And they don't let off. Now, they're not taskmasters, but they're there. And I believe they can leave if they wanted to.
Yeah, they can take off.
See what I'm saying? So these young men are being fed something that they deeply desire, but they didn't know how to ask for it. And I just love how you've just stayed with that, and that you've answered those questions that they don't even know how to ask yet. I just love that.
Yeah, I think that, Tim, one of the things that shakes a lot of evangelical Christians up, which is when I say that God gifted me with a cold heart. Because I love working with the kids that want it. But the ones that come in and try to destroy the place and want to run the show, I can put a 14-year-old out in the cold rain and go home and sleep like a baby. Because our success rate doubles when they come back the second time. When they realize these people ain't playing. They'll put me under a bridge.
Ain't playing.
You know? And so people ask me all the time, how many boys run from here? I go, it never happens, because they had to work hard to get here. They had to convince us that they're worth God's money and our time.
Okay.
And when they come in, they know that there's a waiting list of boys snapping at their heels that want that bed they're in.
Yeah. And you, one of your amazing stories, I presume that it's still true. If it's not, it's okay. But I know that there's no charge for these young men. So my brother here is not only the preacher and the dad to thousands of young men, he's also the go-between for the financial provision. He prays, he tells the story, and God's people give. So he may not say this, but I'm sure gonna. If there are men out there, he would, but I'm just gonna help him. That there's men out there with dads. Maybe you haven't contacted your boy in a long time, but what some of the things that have drawn you here, that God's doing in your life, has drawn you enough far now to hear this podcast, to know that you can still help your son. There's a lot of things you can do. One of them might be that you walk him into youth reach, and you can be involved there. I presume is on weekends and this and that. But boy, what a rescue! You may not have the gifts and the skills yourself, but youth reach does, because they stand firm in the truth, and that's what, again, the question that the young men may not be asking enough to know to ask for, but they're speaking truth to them. And man, their soul just eats it up because it's truth. We'll give you the websites. There's one in Alabama. There's one in Texas. Also, another thing he may not mention, he did the book. We want to put it here as well, White Knuckle Parenting. One of the things I loved there, and maybe we'll go out with this, is that there's how to parent all kind of different personalities of children that you have. But the one that popped off the page for me is when he described that this will also help the parents that have been blessed, and I don't think you just used that word cheeky, but that we're blessed to have a strong-willed child. What would you speak to that, to the parents, as well as, if you could, speak to the strong-willed young man that's also out there?
Yeah, I mean, that whole thing got coined by James Dobson years ago, and he made the comment that there's two types of kids. There's that a compliant child, and they grow up to be a good employee, loyal friends, great worker bees. And then he says, if you can raise the strong-willed child. So he's kind of saying if you don't drown them or something.
Yeah.
Because, but he says that they grow up to be the entrepreneurs.
Yeah, man.
The risk takers.
That's what I'm talking about.
Most presidents of the United States started out with their mama pulling their hair out.
I just love when it says, blessed to be strong-willed.
Yeah.
Like, yes,
and
that one.
We've got a sign at Youth Reach that says, we don't want to tame you, we want to aim you.
I like
I want to
it.
take that wild heart,
Yes, sir.
and point it in the right direction. And guys, I don't know if we're going to complete the Great Commission with our church kids, because most church parents are raising them to pursue the American dream, not the Great Commission.
Man.
So when we get these boys in, they running from the law, send me to Cambodia where I can stay one step ahead of the law.
Yeah.
You know, they want to go and they want to do damage to the kingdom of darkness. They want to advance the kingdom of light. And, you know, they're wild-eyed. I mean, we had a boy that stole a police car. The cop left it running, went in to get a cup of coffee, and it's gone. And this little kid tore that car up. They had to spike strip their own tires. I think that's my favorite
that's
kid
funny.
right there, you know?
What's that young man's name?
But we've had arsonists that have burned their school down. I asked the boy, why'd you do that? I didn't want to go to school. I go, well, there's better ways to do it than burn your school down, you know?
I would have said, well, neither do I, but we shouldn't do that part.
But when you have a boy that will run from the cops, a boy that will, burn his school, fight the police when they come after him, man, when they come to Christ, you're not going to put a cute little robe on them in a hymn book and say, sing in our choir.
Thank God.
They are not going to be feminized. They want to know how to be a man. How do I aim this thing that God gave me? I mean, I am today still a strong-willed child. If you tell me to sit down, I might, but inside I'm standing up. I want to know why.
I love it.
Tell me, prove it to me. And that so much we just want to tame them. We want to beat them down.
Love it.
And man, you got to set them free. Just, every time somebody calls us on the phone and the phone gets passed to me and there's this mom telling this terrible story about, and all I can think of is, I can't wait to meet him. That sounds like my kind of kid, just spitting fire, man. I want that one,
Yeah.
And man, we take them on long runs where at first, man, they're throwing up in the grass. But man, we teach a man that a man is a man of discipline. There are too many 30, 40, 50, 60-year-old boys walking around.
Amen.
We need them to grow up and be men.
Well, if you guys have been listening and or watching this episode of Stand Up Dude, and it has touched you in some way, we would love to hear from you. You can reach us at podcast@standupdude.com. You can also find us on our social media pages. We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram. We're on TikTok now. We're on YouTube. So you can drop us a line there. But also, if you go to standupdude.com/podcast, you can find our voice message link on the page. It will be a little orange tab if you're on a regular browser. On the right-hand side, you pop that out. You can leave us a voicemail. If we find your voicemail interesting enough, we may feature you in a future episode of the Stand Up Dude podcast.
And we'd also love to know, remember where you were? I just want to say, look, hey, if you've been influenced, if you'd like to see this or that, if inspired, possibly even changed to a degree, praise God. We'd love to hear about that, man. And we're like he said, we're gonna play some back here as well during the podcast. We got all kind of great plans. So hit that little button. Leave us. I think, how long is it? 60 seconds.
You can leave up to about a 2-minute.
2-minute one,
actually. So also, if you or someone you know is in need of the services that Curt mentioned with Youth Reach. We will leave a link in the show notes. You can click that and find out more information and hopefully get connected with the resources that you need. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in to this episode of the Stand Up Dude podcast. I am Stewart White, along with my host.
I'm still Tim Bisagno.
And this has been the Stand Up Dude podcast. So tune in next time.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Curt.
Thank you.
Guys, appreciate it.
Go.